Well, my father had been a hard rock miner in Jamestown. He got interested in a place up on the hill called the Anchorage. My dad and Rex Bailey bought the rooming house, which was next door at the site of the present Tulagi, and tore it down in that summer of 50, started building the new building. And the name Tulagi, which is from an island in the South Pacific in the Solomon Islands. My father had this dream in which he was shipwrecked. He was cast adrift, was about to give up, and finally came upon this nice sandy shore, palm-studded beach, was saved. He always thought he'd like to have a tavern or a nightclub, and if he did, he'd name it Tulagi. There was a mural on the back wall of which depicted a South Island scene, purely imaginative, and Ed Whitaker painted the mural. The painting had a lot of sentimental value for my dad and our family, and so in the lease there was always a clause that stated that the painting had to stay, could not be altered or painted over.
We wanted to change it and they wouldn't. We had, because there's one of the other brothers or sons died at the Tulagi atoll in World War II in the Pacific, and there was a big picture of the in the back, yeah, which we couldn't cover at the time either.
Well, it had this, supposedly the island of Tulagi with a lagoon, with a sailboat in the lagoon. And then over on either side, they had jungle, foliage. And they had extremely politically incorrect natives with like bones through their nose and stuff over here. And God, by the 70s, you know, the thing was getting pretty beat up and looking really tacky.
And you know what the Tulagi is, right? From Tulagi Island, where the owner's son was killed in World War II or something like that.
I was 14 years old, so I very well could not, should not have been in the service at that time, and really was not in the South Pacific, and it was not me.
We really got into rock and roll, of course, when Heartbreak Hotel came out. And I think I was probably in 8th grade or 9th grade over at Casey. There was a talent show. Stormy Patterson got up on the stage and sang Heartbreak Hotel, and so I got kind of an interest in that. The summer of my sophomore year in high school, Bob Demon and I had been friends for years, and they were kind of playing, he and Stormy were playing, and Brad Leach was playing drums with them. And Brad Leach is the former sheriff of Boulder. That was the Stormtroopers, because of Stormy's name. It was Troupers. We were playing out at the Olympic Lounge. One of Bob's old fraternity brothers had seen a little bit of press we'd gotten. The article had been written by Doug Looney. Had an interest in us and said if we came to Chicago, we could cut a record. Went to Palladium, it was called. It's a small studio, and we cut our first record, and Stan said, the song is okay, but the name isn't going to work. Actually, had thought about the button-downs at that time. Pretty snazzy, huh? The Astronauts, the whole thing was just going on, Scott Carpenter and all that, and that's just kind of what we chose.
Yeah, the Astronauts were already extant at that time, so they were in the Musicians Union. And so was I. Most of the people around didn't have union cards back then because there were only 2 bands in town. At the end of the summer, the Astronauts asked me to join.
The 4 of the front guys were vocalists, so each guy had certain songs they do.
Stormy, he was fun on stage and off. He was always partying, you know. He was like big jock in high school and wrestling champ, state wrestling champ in Boulder High, you know, and big avid skier, you know. So he was always hanging out with the sports ski party crowd. Bob was a music major, was about to get his degree. Yeah, he was a trumpet player as well.
Dennis Lindsay was a natural-born comedian and would work the crowd. Sometimes during the first break or something, Dennis would put on a dress or a pair of coveralls or black his teeth out or black his eyes or get up and tell a few jokes. The kids really liked all of that.
He had great theatrical skills. You know, he did imitation, vocal imitations, and we did comedy routines. You know, we worked up bits, you know, and just, you know, knock it out, cover band, rock and roll, garage band. We knew we wanted to make money, and we wanted to meet girls, and we liked to play music, and what are you going to do with that, you know, man?
We decided to go up to Tulagi when Matt Rowan offered us $125 instead of $100. We were on the hill. It was just alive. It was just waiting for this band thing to break.
Colorado was real popular, big party school back in those days. You know, I mean, Playboy magazine by that time was running, you know, party schools, and CU won it 3 years in a row, and they retired them. They said, you guys can't compete anymore, you know.
We used to think it was the largest draft beer selling place in the whole country. I don't know if that's really true or not.
But once we got the gig at Tulagi's that fall for like 5 nights a week through that year, the fall of, that would have been fall of '61, for the whole school year, you know. And it was heavenly. And then we started adding stuff on because we were making dough, you know, so we bought some gear, bought outfits, and we started feeling good about, you know, the crowds we were drawing and the fact that it actually was growing.
When Ward Terry was the RCA distributor in Denver, he had a lot of pull. He loved the band. So he had contacted Steve Scholes at RCA. So Bob and I got on a plane and we went out to Hollywood, and we went into the old NBC studios at Sunset and Vine, and we were ushered in to meet Steve Scholes. And while we were sitting there, the phone rang. And he goes, yeah, you know, and he covers the phone. He said, you guys play any surf music? And we said, oh, sure. And he said, okay, well, I've got a group here. I'm going to talk to them about it. And he hung up and he said, we need a surf band. He said, that was our guy up in Pomona, and the Beach Boys are killing us.
I've always thought of the astronaut's career as being a metaphor for the whole Boulder music scene in total, just because it was so flaky. It was cute and nice and just the strangest damn thing you could hear of. Here's a band 1,000 miles away from the nearest ocean playing surf music.
He said, I've got an A&R man heading out. I'll have him come by and listen to you guys, and then we'll take it from there.
When he came out to hear us, people were lined up 4 abreast, all the way up the corner and around the corner, waiting to get in. After the place had already filled up, you know, somebody'd leave, they'd open the table, somebody else would come in. I mean, it was just really, they were doing incredible business. He went back to LA and notified us that we had been accepted. A 9-month contract with 4 one-year options. Guaranteed 18 sides per year, meaning an album and 3 singles, 3 double-sided singles minimum. I mean, when the second biggest record company in the world, biggest in the country at the time, offers you a 5. I mean, Elvis was on RCA, for Christ's sake. You know, we're going to turn down a deal with RCA? Not on your life. Well, sure, we signed the contract. Bingo. Well, they moved fast on us. You know, we got the actual contract, the record contract, in April. We had an album on the market in June.
Then we went out to Hollywood and recorded the first album in Studio C of the old NBC building. It had a dark parquet floor, and there wasn't a square inch that didn't have a cigarette burn in it.
We get a big bundle of what they called acetates in the mail, dubs, you know, songs that they wanted us to learn. You know. Well, Henry Mancini was on the RCA roster, so he wrote a tune for us called Bonsai Pipeline, which was kind of cool. You know, we dug it, and we dug the fact that Mancini wrote it for us. And there was a tune called Batman, which was not the Batman theme. And, you know, that's where we found, you know, Baja. You know how it went? You know how it went? Dum, bum, 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 bum. Honest to God, I'm listening. Well, that's kind of weird. Is that what surf music is? Is that what surf music is? But Lee Hazelwood wrote it. Bob's doing the chin, 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 the steady rhythm bottom line, you know, and I was doing the tee, 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 the melody line. And then Dennis was doing parts. You know, we worked out different voicings. So if somebody's playing a chord here, somebody else would voice it differently someplace else, you know, so that it would fatten up the sound harmonically, you know.
They wanted a surf picture, and that was such a great surf picture of the surfer, the ocean, the sun was just right. It was a gal, and they did airbrush the silhouette so that it looked like a guy.
It was like we did the surfing album, and it made some noise in the charts, you know. The Baja, the single, you know, spent 1 week in the 90s of Billboard's Top 100 and then dropped off. And West Coast stations were picking us up because it was surf music. And we had breakouts in Baltimore, we had breakouts in Philly. So the second album was live. You know, they're a college band and they're appealing to a college market. And so then the third album, they said, well, let's try a hot rod album. Okay, you know, let's do a hot rod song. And by this time, we're all kind of going, well.
You know, we always tried to get the astronauts to play our high school, you know, proms and stuff, but they were either out of town or too expensive.
You know, we went to Princeton, we went to West Point, you know, we played a gig in West Point. First band they'd ever had on the campus of West Point. And by the end of the night, man, it looked like Tulagi. You know, I mean, guys with their jackets off in the corner, nobody had any shoes on, everybody was hammered. It was wonderful. You know, set back Western military tradition, a couple hundred years maybe, you know.
That's really was our bread and butter, and we were flying and doing real well with that. The records were kind of going, but we were really making good money on the road.
If we were doing like an all-Greek thing at Oklahoma State, you know, where they were paying us big bucks and flying us in and out, bam, in and out on the weekend, you know. And we did a lot of TV in the West Coast. We did guest shots in 4, you know, B, C grade, D grade surf movies. I don't know how you grade surf movies. We're gonna find it. I think it was Surf Party. That was the one that had Sonny and Cher, see, so that was before they had done anything, you know.
I remember I was refinishing a table or something in the basement of my parents' home, and I Want to Hold Your Hand came on the radio, and I thought, we've had it. This is not good, because I went out and bought the single. It was so good.
It was rough for us because we really didn't have, we didn't write a lot, you know, hardly any in the beginning, and because it wasn't common. It wasn't common for artists to write their own material. You know. Then the Beatles came along here, all of a sudden here's a group that's writing all their own stuff. So it's like, well, better try to do something with that, you know. And when we tried and didn't do very well at it.
And then all of a sudden we had this hit in Japan.
When we got there, after an 18-hour flight over the pole, you know, this is like, there are like 8,000 kids at the airport, you know, and flowers and interview rooms, and you know, we knew we were big because we could tell by the charts, but we had no idea we were going to get that kind of reception.
We played 2 concerts a day, and it was grueling, but it was really fun because the success was unbelievable, and we enjoyed the star treatment. Well,
Vietnam, you know, it was heating up all through the 60s, you know, Beatles, British invasion. The DJs, I mean, they just would barely give you a break, you know, if you weren't British. Dennis, I think he was the first one that got drafted, and then Jim got drafted shortly after that. That's when the draft was really cranking up.
I went in the Army, which was October of 1965. I netted $3,800. In November, when I got drafted, I netted $92. The astronauts did pretty well.
We gave it the best that we had for the time. Just didn't happen for us, you know. We got real close, you know. Almost had a national hit. I quit, kept our manager, and worked out a deal where we could record with Capitol with a new band called Hard Water. Moved to LA and did that for about a year and a half. I came back to Boulder and ran into Flash Cadillac back when Harold and Mick were still in the band, and they just knocked my socks off.
I went to a Flash Cadillac concert. I was underage, snuck into Tulagi.